The preview show is back for UFC 291, drawing ever so closer to UFC 300. Yeah, way to kick a man when he's down. There's such things as bad winners as well, Sean Sheen. We'll just leave it at that. and you do. You're some man to give out after winning 4 in a row as well. I couldn't get over it. It's like, giving out about what Derek Ling was saying in interviews and
nonsense.
Like, come on, for fuck. It's like, what more do you want after winning 4 in a row?
I want to be loved. That's all anyone wants, Ian. We want to be loved.
That's it. Well, we love this card. Well, some of us love this card. Maybe I'll go over to you first, Harry. I know you have some thoughts on the card itself, but maybe if you want to share, I'd like to get your opinion on the card itself, number one, and then on the actual main event itself and what it's showcased as, and that's the baddest motherfucker, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje in the fight in the main event. Jan Blachowicz, the return of Alex Pochkin, Pereira in the co-main event. Stephen Thompson, Michel Pereira, obviously on the main card, with a couple of others that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But as I said, your thoughts, please, sir, on the card itself and the structure of the main event, with it being for the BMF title, in your opinions on that title itself, Harry.
So I think that I'm probably going to combine my answers, if that's okay. I think that the BMF title for me is partly probably the reason that I'm not super hyped for the card. I think that there is a level of, I don't really know. Like, the word that's in my brain is fakery, but it's not really that. Like, I don't really mean that. I just think that the BMF title kind of it was a gimmick, right? Like, it's a gimmick. And I think something that a lot of athletes come into MMA for, come into the UFC for, is because there is an illustrious sort of nature and value. There's an inherent value to being the UFC champion. There's a ton of, reverie that surrounds winning a title. It really means something. It means you're the best in the world at your specific weight class. And when you build the BMF title, like, do you remember when Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather fought, and Floyd bought out this money belt or whatever, right? Or Floyd bought some fucking garbage out, and it kind of devalues the entire thing for me. Right. And I think the other side is actually something that Seanie said a while ago, and it sort of stuck with me, is one of the problems at 155 is how many times do we have to see Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje fight each other? Like, how many times do we have to go around this merry-go-round where it seems that these three are in a triangle and nobody wants to fight down because there's a potential that you lose, obviously, but they know that with a win against any of those two other names, you're going to get a title shot. And so there's this weird logjam that happens at the top. And so whilst the fight itself, and we'll get into all the nitty-gritties and whatever, but the fight itself is going to be a lot of fun. Right? Dustin Poirier is one of my favorite fighters to watch stylistically. Justin Gaethje is a mad bastard that when he's on can be a world beater. Fine. The fight itself will be a lot of fun. But I feel like in a way, we're kind of underpinning this fight by saying neither of these guys are ever going to be a champion. So we've created a belt for them that means that they can have some strap around them that we can then laud them and start to build their name a little bit more. And for me, I just feel like that's slightly devalued. And then if we go to the co-main event, I would love to have seen that as a 5-round title fight. I would have loved to have seen it, specifically with everything that's happened recently. Now,
yeah, we'll definitely. I think we can concentrate that on maybe the co-main event, if you don't mind. We can discuss your feelings around that. But just to maybe piggyback on the BMF, like, I was going to say, like, I don't care, and I was trying to go and wrap it up as a good thing. But I think not really caring is not really a good thing. You should be caring about a fight like this. Now, with the BMF title, Seanie, I think one thing I do like it, but there's no clarity really around this, is that, are we treating this like your normal standard UFC title? Are we getting pay-per-view points? Are we getting like championship clauses added on to these if one of these guys? There's nobody giving us any answers when it comes to that. Maybe what's your opinion on the whole BMF title and that scene?
Honestly, all of that stuff you just said there, I haven't thought about it for 1 second, to be honest. And I kind of, in the last while, I've started keeping a rota of like the upcoming events. So I'd be thinking about them like a couple of weeks ahead. And I was just thinking, oh, Poirier versus Gaethje is coming up. That's the main event. And I'm like, that's the number one contender fight, you know, kind of getting it ready in my head because obviously, Charles versus Islam has been made now. And then they put a promo on last week's event and they were like, oh, for the BMF title. I was like, I completely forgot about it. Like, just completely and utterly forgot about it because it's meaningless. Like, it is at its core absolutely meaningless. Like, it doesn't make any difference. The winner of this will say, whoever wins in Abu Dhabi, I want to fight you next. Both of these guys, if I'm not mistaken, have won an interim title and basically dropped it in the cage and go, that's not the real title. I can't wait to fight for the real title. I want that next, right? That's what's happened. So both of these guys, we know their opinions on this rubbish, right? It's a gimmick. We all know that. Look, at the end of the day as well, when we talk about sports and all that, it's a bit of fun. I actually, what the two of you have just said there, I agree with. I don't care. Like, I don't care. And maybe we should just, like, enjoy it or whatever, or else we'll just be giving out about it. So, like,
I think we will enjoy the fight itself, and Harry kind of alluded to that too.
Yeah, we will the fight, but like the whole belting, and I'm not even saying I'm going to enjoy it or anything. It's just like, it doesn't make any difference.
Like, I'm not overly upset where like it makes me angry, right? Or I'm not like overly excited because I want to see who's the next bad motherfucker. But like, I want to feel something. I feel excitement for the fight, but it's just what it's dressed up as is something that I just can't feed into whatsoever. And I feel, that's a kind of a little bit of disparaging to both of these guys, and Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje as well, to be honest, after what they've done inside the octagon. Like, why not make this for the interim lightweight championship? Why not do that instead of wrapping it up in your BMF title? All right. So, I mean, that's how I feel about it. I mean, Harry, you spoke about the greater landscape of the lightweight division, and maybe that's something we can focus on for a couple of minutes as well, in that we're getting through this kind of one-way merry-go-round where all of these fighters at the top are just fighting each other, and there's very little room for any of the upcoming prospects coming through. What would you like to do to see it changed? And I would argue, is there as much prospects that we can push forward? Like, the two main ones that I have on the top of my head, obviously, are Rafael Fiziev, who lost to Justin Gaethje in his last fight, and Arman Tsarukyan, who, is one step away from maybe making a jump into the upper echelons of the division as well. And, looking at the rankings, in fairness, Gamrot is there too. There's not too many there, and I'm leaving this up for debate as well. I could be wrong. That's just how I'm feeling at this given time. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think that some of the reason why there aren't many contenders is because we force contenders to fight each other because of the logjam at the top. Like, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I hadn't really thought about it from this perspective until you just said it. And part of the reason, I think, is because this is a pay-per-view, and a pay-per-view is supposed to have serious ramifications for a division. And this isn't being marketed as a number one contenders. Now, maybe that's what we think it is. Maybe that's what we, as media, maybe that's what Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier really think it is. But for the people that are going to be buying this pay-per-view predominantly, they're buying it because of this gimmick title. And I think your point is absolutely valid, that what it does is it sort of denigrates on the fighters. Now, anyway, just back to the question that you asked is, if we look at Arman Tsarukyan, if we look at Rafael Fiziev, okay, he fought Justin Gaethje, fine. We look at Benny Daggers, he had to fight Charlie Olives, fine. There's a Grant Dawson, there is a Mateusz Gamrot, and there is an Arman Tsarukyan. Why don't we, or why couldn't we have previously seen them go and fight the Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, and Justin Gaethje? Now, obviously, Fiziev did. It feels like, to the same thing that Seanie said before, and I could be wrong because obviously there's scheduling and there's medical issues and there's all this stuff and contracts and pay and whatever involved. But I would like to have seen those guys not have to fight each other immediately, but go and challenge the upper echelon guys. Let's see that rotation happen, because something that Seanie on the big podcast has been very vocal about, and I agree, is you have to earn your ranking, right? If you're rank 3, Well, you have to earn that ranking. If you go and lose a title fight, well, now you need to go and fight somebody lower down to prove that you are still there. You don't just stay there by default and then just wait your turn until that guy loses, or a matter of time has passed until you get there. And I do feel, although Dustin Poirier has been clamoring for a fight for a little while, it feels like he wants to fight the guys that are going to get him a title shot. And if you go out and you beat an Arman Tsarukyan, who was ranked at 10, let's say, that's not necessarily going to get you that. It will just solidify your place in the rankings before you then have to fight somebody to make that number one contendership. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, anything to add on to that, Seanie?
To be fair, yeah, I've been saying that for a long time, but I do think, in fairness, Poirier won his last fight against Chandler, and Gaethje, especially won his last fight against Fiziev. So at least they are coming off of a win and then putting a second win together to get towards the title. So at least they are doing what I've asked. You know, they've gone out and not gone to like the next in line or tried to wait out for a title shot. The winner of this fight will have won 2 in a row. And, you know, you can, with the point you all just kind of made there about maybe no one having put their head above everyone else with Dariush after losing and all of that, they can be the genuine number one contender. So I don't have too much of a problem with that, to be honest. And everyone knows I've had a lot of a problem with that sort of thing over the last couple of years. So no, I wouldn't complain about that too much, to be honest, either.
Yeah, well, that's enough of the complaining anyway, lads. Let's talk about the positive about this fight. Look, we have to talk about. We talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly here, so we do. And it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, and it's going to be ugly in there in the main event, Harry, on Saturday night. 5 rounds of absolute madness on tap. If the first fight is anything to go by, I think we've all watched it, and it's fresh in our heads from today. That first fight between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, where Dustin Poirier went out and got the TKO stop. The third round? Fourth round. Yeah, sorry. I sorry, lads. Sorry, you're throwing me off with all those reactions.
You died there for a minute, I think, Harry, did he?
Yeah. Your internet froze, and you literally said Dustin Poirier got the stoppage as you froze, and I was like,
in the 4th round. If anybody missed that out, my fucking internet not working again. But looking at that fight, there's a couple of things that we can focus on in terms of game plan. And I think for Gaethje in that fight, it was forward moving pressure and leg kicks were something that he depended on, whereas Dustin Poirier was a kind of a guy who just had confidence in his ability to absorb that damage and to kind of some ways out technique Justin Gaethje in the pocket with his boxing. And, you know, the result is what the result showed. I feel that Justin Gaethje laid it all out, and he was depending on Dustin Poirier buckling and breaking under the pressure. And he was a guy that was happening to with a lot of his opponents, Justin Gaethje, but it didn't happen to Dustin Poirier. When you're looking at both of these guys, I mean, I don't think Dustin Poirier has to change up too much coming into this rematch. I think with Justin Gaethje, does he need to tidy things up? Like the forward move and pressure, it was working against Dustin Poirier, but it just wasn't as effective as he thought. Look, Poirier's leg was all messed up, but I feel that Gaethje's body work and shots to the head were not having any impact at all. And I think that that's going to be the key factor if he is. He can't just solely rely on forward pressure and leg kicking, because Dustin Poirier is going to come in and eat it all up and probably take him out again in this fight. Would you kind of agree with that, Harry?
Definitely. Like, one of the reasons why I enjoyed this fight the most is Seanie and I put out a Speaker's Corner the other week, and it was about MMA oscillating between being a skills predominant sport and then with this influx of sort of freak athleticism, or at least what we determine to be freak athleticism in an MMA space, that there seems to be an ability for certain fighters to just sort of out athlete technique. And we had that conversation. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this fight is Dustin Poirier proved that Justin Gaethje may have been a better athlete, and he may have been trying to athlete his way through the fight with a more athletic game plan. But if you stick to your principles, if you stick to your techniques, if you stick to being defensively sound and offensively sound, you will win fights. And I completely agree with you that actually, if I'm thinking about a way to beat somebody like Dustin Poirier with beautiful switch hitting, really, really, really good when he gets a rhythm going forward, very, very versatile in his shot selection, and really crisp, straight boxing. I mean, the way you beat him is forward pressure and leg kicks, right? Like that's literally what I would determine to be a game plan. I think the other thing that I'd like to see Justin Gaethje meld in is exactly what I'd like to see Dustin Poirier meld in, and that's grappling. Like significant use of grappling, especially when legs are tired and beaten up. But if I'm Justin Gaethje, or if I'm Trevor Whitman in Justin Gaethje's corner, I'm asking him to do exactly the same thing as he did in the Toney Ferguson fight. Everything, take 70% off it, unless you're going to the body. Throw everything at 100% to the body. Keep chewing up the legs, but get the fuck out of the pocket. Right? You know that Poirier is going to switch hit. I think when Poirier starts to switch hit, there's opportunities for Gaethje to level change. And again, we don't need necessarily long, drawn-out grappling sequences. We just need Poirier to be defensively aware of those takedowns. And something that Poirier really enjoys is a switch-through right hand. Right? He will stand and he will throw his jab out, and then he'll switch through on the right hand. As he switches through on the right hand, he often doesn't carry his left hand back immediately. And because he's doing that, there's less of an opportunity for him to down block on the lead leg. So as he switches, Justin Gaethje is going to be able to look to enter on singles, look to turn the corner, and at least look to enter grappling exchanges where Dustin Poirier is going to have to then think about those switch hittings. So I think if I'm Justin Gaethje, I actually think you come in with a similar game plan, not the same, a similar game plan, but one in which where you're just slightly less Justin Gaethje, if that makes sense.
And that's kind of what we've been seeing, Seanie, in recent fights. More kind of refined striking from Gaethje, working behind his jab much better, obviously with the help of Trevor Whitman. But, you know, I feel even at this stage of his career that at times Justin Gaethje can kind of be like a kid in a candy shop where he gets drawn into the battle just a little bit, where we have Whitman saying in the corner, just take some stuff off your punches, utilize and work off the jab. And even in the Fiziev fight, you know, he did it on and off, and he got away with it a little bit against the lesser experienced Fiziev, but he ain't going to get away with getting drawn into a war against Dustin Poirier, isn't he not?
Maybe, right? So the bigger problem here, I think, is what are you going to do instead, right? Get into a technical matchup with someone who destroyed you technically 5 years ago? You know, maybe
you could get technical from the outside, like Harry said, rather than try to fight in a phone booth a little bit. You know, easier said than done as well. I mean, that means that you're going to invite Dustin Poirier on, which he kind of enjoys as well.
I'd argue that Poirier would actually win if they were fighting on the outside, even easier than if they fought in the phone booth. I think if they did fight in the phone booth, Gaethje has a chance of winning in there. Like the first fight, right? Just to briefly go back to it. First of all, if you're going to watch it, anyone listening to this, turn the sound off because it's so horrendously bad. Like they were basically saying, "Oh, Gaethje 2 rounds up." He was Poirier 2018, 1919 on the cards. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But what Gaethje did well was kick the leg, basically, and nothing else. He got absolutely, as you said, Ian, very well there. The switch hitting, he was just so good with a Poirier. It was just eating him up. And the only thing surprising to me was it lasted that long, that Gaethje was able to take that much damage. Poirier was just hitting him and hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. And you've two options if you're in that point. You either look and say, look, what went well? The leg kicks went well. Let's throw more leg kicks. Let's just go ham on it altogether. Or like Harry said there, maybe switch it up a little bit. But funnily enough, you know, Harry said more wrestling from both of them, but especially Gaethje maybe. I'd nearly say more wrestling from Poirier would be a real ticket. And not even wrestling, but maybe clinching. And in the first round especially. Because Gaethje's an unbelievable leg kicker, but he's a first round leg kicker. You know, he always kind of gives up on it a little bit, or, you know, the damage is maybe already done, and then he starts to attack up high. If you can clinch him early, stop him landing that leg kick early, by the time the fight gets to the second or third round, he's not going to be thrown as much. Your legs are not going to be as damaged as they were in the first fight, and it's bombs away for you at that point. So I think the tactical changes that Poirier can make, we always look at fights, right? And if one guy loses, we think, what tactical change can that guy make to make the fight more even or to win the fight? Whereas with that fight, and that's always the easier thing to do, right? Because the first guy, well, he won it. He doesn't need to change anything. And it's always easier to see how the losing guy changes. But in this one, I think it's nearly easier to see how Poirier wins more handily rather than how Gaethje wins. Because as well, Gaethje has become a more technical fighter since that, but he's not going to catch up with the level of Poirier, right? Unless Poirier is not the fighter he once was, which is a possibility as well. He's getting on in age and everything like that. But if you were to look at him and there's no falling off a cliff, no chin's gone or anything like that, I think it's going to be very hard for Gaethje to win this tactical battle, in my opinion.
A question for both of you. If you had to bet on, I'm not a betting man, so I'm not going to do it. If you had to bet on, out of the two fighters, whose chin goes first?
Gaethje, because Gaethje's went first in the first fight, to be honest. You know, and look, that's an accumulation of, you know, having to land flush and hitting the perfect shot as well, obviously. But I mean, that's an accumulation. If you're Gaethje here, I think Dustin is so damn good on the inside. He's better head movement. He has better footwork than the first fight. He rolls under punches so much better. His setups are so much better than the first fight. Like, the only thing that can cost Dustin Poirier in this fight for me is what Sean said, is that if he's somehow fallen off a cliff and or something has happened in camp. I really studied that fight today, and I really tried to think up of a way that Gaethje might come out and do something different. And he might do something different, but it's just such a horrible stylistic matchup for Gaethje. Gaethje was forced to change his style because he was unable to get guys at the elite level to break under his pressure. He grew up and he came so strong into mixed martial arts and into the UFC by imposing his will on fighters. And that only works for so long. It didn't work against Dustin Poirier in that fight, and I don't think it's going to work in this fight. And now you're crossed with a double-edged sword of, do you get into a tit-for-tat battle with such a very good striker like Dustin Poirier? I'm very curious. Like, to me, the big question is how or if Gaethje, can he figure out something here?
But to that point as well, and maybe slightly to the point Harry was the question he threw out, he could land just one big shot. Like, and if you do get into that sort of war, that sort of fight, like, maybe the answer to Poirier's, Harry's question is Poirier. You know, maybe Gaethje's getting destroyed, and he lands one big shot, and Poirier goes out like that. That can, and not to say that doesn't mean Poirier's chin is gone or anything like that. He hits so hard he could do it if it turns into a mad fight like that. I'm interested to throw a question back maybe at you, Harry, as well. What type of fight do you think it will be like? Because like I watched the first fight, and you're thinking it's kind of going to be more of a war than it's actually going to be. And it kind of just turns into a little bit like Melendez-Sanchez, which is a war, but it's a one-sided war, you know, in a way. It's one guy picking another guy off one, and the other guy does land some big things. But like this one, I find it very hard to kind of see this turning into a war again, because I think Gaethje will try to fight more technical, even though I think that's probably the worst thing he could do.
Yeah.
So I think that what's going to happen is Justin Gaethje is going to look like Nathaniel Wood, where he's going to come out and he's going to be like, sure, look, I've got a game plan, and here's my game plan. And then 45 seconds in, he's going to get clipped and he'll be like, game plan? I can't even 100%. Spell game plans. 1 second, I'm going to get my fucking kitchen sinks.
Probably can't spell game plan.
Probably not. And here we're fucking going, right? And I think Dustin Poirier gets it done quicker than he did last time. And you mentioned, and I was going to get to Dustin Poirier and what I would think he would do, but I actually think you're completely right. If I'm Dustin Poirier, I'm going to try and put a clinic on in the first round, and then I'm going to grapple. And then I'm going to grapple a bit more. And we have seen how poor Justin Gaethje's submission awareness and positional defensive stuff is on the ground. Dustin Poirier could 100% submit him, like. And if he couldn't submit him or doesn't want to submit him, Dustin Poirier on top of you landing a ton of shots. I mean, what are we going to do? We're either getting TKO'd or we're giving our back, right? And so I have maybe a want, right? Maybe this is just a biased want, but I see that there is an avenue here where Dustin Poirier makes this an MMA fight and Justin Gaethje just gets absolutely drowned.
I think that's very, very kind of true to what's going to happen, to be honest, because I look at it from the bigger picture, and it's like, okay, this is going to sound stupid when I say it. I do say lots of silly things, but I feel Dustin Poirier at this stage of his career coming in to take on a guy that he's already beaten and beaten comprehensively. One would ask why he's going to take this fight again. Well, no, two of them are on good win streaks. I think he's taking this fight because he's supremely, supremely, supremely confident that he's going to go in there and pick up a good win relatively easy. That's what I feel he's thinking in his own head, because does he want to, at this stage of his career, go in and insert himself into another war? I don't think that that's going to be good for him, especially at this stage of his career. And I feel that, you know, he's a guy who's picking and choosing his fights very wisely in the latter stages, obviously with the Conor fights and everything like that. And it's done him justice. He's catapulted himself into a big name and into a good personality, and one, you know, people liked him in general anyway, but you know, that level of platform you get from, number one, fighting in a Conor McGregor fight, but number two, beating him and then beating him twice, you know, has risen him into the kind of where he has to pick and choose his next moves very correctly. And he probably has it in the back of his head that he has one last crack, a little bit of fresh meat, Islam Makhachev at the top of the division. And I think he goes in there and wins this relatively easy too, because I think he's smarter than Justin Gaethje. He's more technical and just a better overall fighter than Justin Gaethje as well. And Justin Gaethje, I mean, I don't need to prompt you for this, Sean, because I feel it as well. I feel he's massively overrated for where he's been in the UFC over the last couple of years, to be honest. And I think you put him in there with the likes of Saryukin or give Fiziev another crack at him. I think he's going to be the guy that's going to be the gatekeeper for the next couple of years within the UFC's lightweight division. That might be very harsh.
I don't think I go that far now, to be fair, but what one of you said a minute ago is he got to the very top level and he realized his style wouldn't be able for the top level, you know, and not to stick the oar in here, Ian, or anything, but we've seen that in hurling over the last.
Come on now, you're not missing out for doing that's strike two now. That's strike two, for fuck's sake.
Get to that level.
I can't believe it. I'm hurt. I'll have to log off here.
Well, I apologize.
That's
but
all good.
I can just see this fight like in the third or fourth round, with Poirier just putting on the pressure, and there's like a 7 or 8 shot combination, and next thing Gaethje falls, his blood covering him. Poirier just jumps on the back, takes it, rear naked, chokes him, and Herb Dean, whoever the referee is, has to step in because Gaethje refuses to tap, and the blood just starts squirting from his face as he gets the life choked out of him. Like, that's how this fight ends, in my opinion. Like, that's a very specific way of the fight ending, but like, would you expect anything less in this sort of fight? And I just wonder here, and if that happened, I think it'd be a great fight. And I think we're all probably predicting either a very good fight or like a very good beatdown. What if it isn't, right? What if Gaethje does, and I've said this a couple of times, what if he does fight more technical and Poirier is happy enough to kind of jab him from the outside, maybe jab to the body, and, you know, kind of both try to kick the leg and kick it from the outside, and maybe it isn't as ferocious as the first time. Like, I could see a fight playing out more like this time,
and that's not what the UFC want, and that's why this fight was labeled the BMF title. And by naming this the BMF title, you're kind of putting that pressure and that onus of both of these guys to go out there and put on a war. But I think
the point is, the first point I made, like, this is a number one contender fight for them.
It is. There's a lot at stake than a fucking stupid gimmick fight. You know what I mean? So, like, it could very well be where Justin Gaethje thinks that I'm not going to. Harry doesn't agree at all.
There's no way.
I know. We want to try and think that Gaethje might come in and stay in his lane a little bit and not have that much output. But I have a feeling, you know, he's going to be drawn out, and I think that's what you think as well, Harry, isn't it?
If we get 3 rounds deep, right, and Justin Gaethje has done his best to stay technical and to really try and pick apart Dustin Poirier in a way that we would call a technical game plan, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Justin Gaethje may have gone and made incredible leaps and made advancements in this camp and in between Rafael Fiziev and now, and he could come out with new skills. Trevor Whitman is an absolutely fantastic coach, so we shouldn't put it past their relationship to think that he could have built into something and gone on to another level. However, how many times have we said that when fights start to get a little bit crazy, when they go from gears 1 and start to get to gears 3 and 4, fighters are reduced to the fibers of their beings, to the foundations of their training. Justin Gaethje, the foundations are, I want to do backflips off a cage after I've just eaten 7,000 shots. I can't see out of my right eye, but I've landed one shot and your man's dead. Like, that's who he is. Like, there is, and if we get to rounds 3 and he's 3 rounds down comprehensively, there's just no way that he stays at the game plan. There's just no way. There's just no way.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think Seanie tends to agree as well, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm looking forward. I'm actually looking forward to it more than when we started talking about it. These preview shows, they always help get the juices flowing. Hopefully, it's the same for anyone who's listening as well. But we shall move on to the co-main event, and that is another juicy affair between Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira, who is now officially, I'm making the announcement here now, Vicente Luque out, Alex Pereira in as my favorite fighter of all time. No, I'm only joking.
That's another bad choice there, in my opinion.
No, I really enjoy watching fighters that scare the living bejesus out of me. And when I see Alex Pereira walking and how he carries himself, he scares the living bejesus out of me. Now, it would have been a bit rich for me to say that and then go on to say what I'm going to say next, because I think this is a fairly tough test for him if Jan Blachowicz, and this is the general conversation that we've been having with Alex Pereira fights. If he goes out and he starts to fight a smart fight and utilizes and turns this into a mixed martial arts fight, I think this could be a very, very long night for Alex Pereira. There's 2 things that's standing out for me for Pereira here. One, it's a fairly quick turnaround from the last fight against Izzy, and he was knocked out bad in that fight. And number 2, Jan Blachowicz is not Sean Strickland. And I would be very surprised if he went out and fought like Sean Strickland in this fight, because I think he'd be writing his own death sentence if he was to chose to stand and bang for the majority of the fight for as long as it lasts with Alex Pereira. Now, don't get me wrong, Jan Blachowicz does have very underrated striking as well. And, you can ask Israel Adesanya about that as well. But I'm very, very intrigued to see how this goes down. I am very, 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 very hung. Early in the week, it was like, Pereira he's going to draw him in and he's going to knock him out. And now I'm leaning more towards Jan Blachowicz actually taking him down and putting him on his back, because, in that draw, he was a lot more competitive against Ankalaev than people want to admit. So, you can't even look at that result and not think that he's going to come in with a similar enough game plan, Harry. How do you kind of see this one playing out? This
is my favorite fight on the card. It's my favorite fight on the card because we are going to see... It's my favorite fight on the card for Jeopardy reasons alone, right? In that, we've already said what we said about Poirier and Gaethje, but we're going to find out, I think, really and truly with Alex Pereira, whether mixed martial arts is something that he's been doing, or has he brought a kickboxing style over and is doing kickboxing in 4-ounce gloves, right? I think with Jan Blachowicz, very rarely does he fight unintelligently. Sometimes he may not have fought to the level of his competition. Sometimes he just didn't have the skills to win fights. Fine. Sometimes he just gets caught in fights.
Sometimes he doesn't show up. And I believe he didn't show up against Glover Teixeira in that fight when he was defending he just simply did not show up in that fight. And, that leaves a question mark on whether it could happen again, Harry.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. You've already said this. If he stands and trades with Pereira for long enough, he's going to be staring up at the light sooner rather than later. Because you can have a jerky, unantiquated style and you can be awkward and your footwork patterns and your beats and your rhythms can be weird. And that's exactly what Izzy said, right? But when you're Alex Pereira Alex moves differently and fights differently from Israel Adesanya. Israel is an outside fighter. He is much more light on his feet. Pereira is much more of a shuffle, trod in, Thai style, high guards, high knees, plodding, and then cracks you. And so Jan Blachowicz, that bouncing cadence that he holds and that awkward rhythm and timing is actually much easier for Pereira to decipher, because Pereira just isn't moving anywhere in comparison to what Israel Adesanya is doing, where Israel is looking to force you to bite on his feints, and that's how he's going to get his entrances. Pereira is the opposite. He's just going to walk you down and he's just going to start throwing shit. And then whatever happens then is what happens. And so I think where this plays nicely for Jan Blachowicz is because Pereira is going to walk forward, Jan just needs to be aware of the knees coming up the middle. So if he sets up the takedowns correctly with a low kick, with a nice jab, with a 1-2, with an entrance that comes at an angle, the knees are going to be less effective and the knees are going to be less of a danger. But if Jan just comes in and tries to either just stand and bang, I can't see him coming in and just being like, yeah, I'm just going to beat him on the feet. But if he comes in and is lazy with his takedowns, he's probably getting sent to the Shadow Realm too. But if not, I think he destroys Alex Pereira on the floor. Like, I think he destroys him. I really do.
100%.
Yeah. And this is why I'm excited for the fight.
Yeah, we're going to find out. Like, we're going to find out this. Like, look at, you said, are we going to find out whether Alex Pereira is a mixed martial artist, Harry, or is he a guy who's just kickboxing in 4-ounce glove? I believe he is a mixed martial artist, but the problem is, you know, you can only come so far in so amount of time, and I'm not sure if he's given himself the amount of time to get fully well-rounded coming into a fight like this with Jan Blachowicz. Seanie, what are your thoughts on the whole contest and the matchup?
Yeah, he's come so far and he's reached so high, is a famous take that one said. But I think this is going to be an absolute destruction by Blachowicz, unless that number I see there at the top of Sherdog, 40, unless that's the big thing. And it might very well be. He's only fought once since 2021 when he lost to Grover Teixeira. Sorry, twice. And he's only won once. He won once against Rakic, but that was the injury, and then he did draw, obviously. He didn't look terrible against Ankalaev. Okay, I think, look, I don't know what Harry's opinion on Ankalaev is now, but massively overrated would be my opinion.
Easy, lads, easy. Sean is fucking... Sean is coming at me. He's coming at Harry. Jesus. He's out for blood today.
It's all love. It's all love. Look, as I said with the Gaethje one, but more so with this one, Pereira can come in and knock the block off anyone. You know, if he's so slow, he can't get across to take him down. If he can't set things up. And I think a big part of it, I talked to Graham on the podcast about it, and Graham was kind of saying, like, just take him down immediately. If he does that, I think it's bad news, because, like, he will be prepared. Like, as you said, Ian, he's a mixed martial artist, and give him some bit of credit anyway. Now, he did go in and have a white belt grappling match with Izzy Adesanya there for a while in one of their fights, but if we leave that aside, I'm sure there'll be some sort of preparation there. But I think Blachowicz is good enough to strike with him for a while, right? If he strikes him for 5 rounds, will he get caught at one stage with a big shot? Probably, right? So, but can he strike with him for 3 minutes of a round and then tie him up, and then strike with him for a couple of minutes the next round and maybe take him down, or take him down in the first round? Yes, I think that has to be the game plan. Don't panic, don't rush. Do exactly what you did against Adesanya. It's going to be a different fight, as Harry very well put it there, in terms of where it's fought, but it's the same thing. Be careful. Don't do anything mad. Get a takedown. And I think once he does that, Pereira is going to be like a fish up a tree on the ground, and he's going to get destroyed.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of leaning towards in this one as well. I don't think there's too much more to that we can say about that contest, really. I mean, it's fairly straightforward from a terminology and on what we're kind of expecting. If it stays on the feet, it's going to be a lot more interesting than if it hits the mat. And I would be expecting Jan Blachowicz. I wouldn't fuck about on the feet at all. I'd be doing like Graham suggested, to be honest. I'd be getting in. I'd be Randy Couture ankle picking the shit out of Alex Pereira there, coming into the middle of the cage to start this fight, and be very interesting to see how long Pereira can last. For this could be This could be a first round knockout, first round submission, no matter where the fight goes. We'll find out where it goes on Saturday night. I don't think there's going to be too many questions, guys, about where the next fight goes, and that's Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Michel Pereira. And I feel that this one is going to play out on the feet, Johnny. I'm going to give you first on deck. You're number one fan, number one cheerleader for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I was really looking forward to seeing this fight in Vancouver. It didn't materialize. We get to see it at 291. It should be an interesting contest.
It should. I wonder how Pereira is going to fight would be my first question here. Like we have seen in his last few fights, he has become more of a normal fighter, if you want to say that. You know, when he came into the UFC, he was a fan favorite, and he was doing his jumping and messing and bollocksing, and it was absolutely brilliant. I absolutely loved it. Look, two of my favorite fighters, two lads on Team Sheehan, I believe. So I absolutely love this.
Are they fighting for a place on Team Machine on Saturday night?
No, they'll both remain.
You're feeling soft. The old 4 in a row now is after making you soft.
I'm a winner no matter what happens. But I do think, to answer my own question, the great question I just put to myself there, I do think Pereira will come out and he'll go at him and he'll go for it and he'll be a bit more mad. And Wonderboy never gets to fight against lads who will just fight against him the way he wants to be fought against. Like Kevin Holland maybe did a little bit, and we see what happens to him. Like, and he didn't even. He tried to take him down a little bit as well, but it should be fun. It should be really fun. Like you would think Wonderboy will be trying to fight more from the outside in a more controlled fashion, while Pereira will be trying to make Wonderboy lose control a little bit. I think he'll throw in a takedown as well, Pereira, because he's done that in all his fights, really, or a lot of his fights anyway, but not in like I'm going to go and I'm just trying to try to wrestle you type of thing. I think he will be trying to land his big blows, whereas Wonderboy will be trying to technically win the fight and bombs away after that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. You've two lads, right, who are constantly up against guys who want to stop their game plan, who want to, whatever we do here, like fighting Wonderboy changed Woodley's whole career. He fought Wonderboy for the rest of his career after he fought him because he's such a weird style. When you're fighting Pereira, you're going to have to bring in guys, bring in a Johnny Walker or bring in, someone to prepare for him. But now they're up against two guys who are similar to themselves, not very similar, but similar in that there's mad, brilliant, talented strikers opposed to them. And what's that going to lead to? I don't know, honestly, because we don't really see it.
Would you be more confident if Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was a little bit younger in his career, Seanie?
Yes, that's a problem. Like, and that's kind of a team in this card, funnily enough, isn't it? Like, I see that number again. What's the number? It's 40. It's like a bingo card or something, pulling out the numbers here. I would, even though I think he looked pretty good against Kevin Holland. The Bilal Muhammad fight, you can kind of write it off, I suppose, as maybe with the Gilbert Burns one as well. But Kevin Holland is an easy guy to look good against, I suppose, even, and maybe he didn't look as fast as he once was, and the age has shown a little bit, but still, he had enough. Will he have enough against Pereira? Yeah, fuck it, he will. Wonderboy for the win. That's it.
I'm leaning towards Wonderboy here too, as well, Harry. And I'm wondering, is it going to be a case for him when we're getting into the nuts and bolts of this fight, what he needs to do to win? I think Seanie alluded to it, like maybe fighting on the outside, maybe creating traps where you're forcing Michel Pereira forward with those explosive movements, making him miss, maybe countering with a couple of body shots, slowing him down, because we've seen Pereira slow down as fights progress. And, Stephen Wonderboy doesn't really slow down, but he has a style that, isn't really, it complements cardio, really, his style overall in Wonderboy Thompson. When you're looking at this from an analytical perspective, what are you expecting to see?
The number 40 just screams out to me. It really does. If Wonderboy was 5 years younger, I don't think Pereira makes it out the first round.
Not a chance.
I just think he's too reckless. Even when he comes in with the slightly more technical style, Wonderboy would eat him alive. My fear coming in here is Wonderboy is going to need space to set the traps up. Wonderboy is going to need time to set the traps up. And he is slowing. As you know, he's fucking 40. Of course he's slowing. And I wonder with Pereira, is he going to be able to negate the time and the space efficiency that Wonderboy is losing in his age? I can see both things happening, right? I can see that Wonderboy is just going to sidekick him, jab him, stay on the outside, and that Pereira's going to overextend himself and Wonderboy will just knock his head into the fucking side of the canvas. Like, that can absolutely happen for sure. I also wonder whether Wonderboy is going to get crowded a little by the explosive madness and take a couple of shots, and now we're in this, this downward spiral for him. I do think it'll be an entertaining fight. I think, as always, I will generally lead toward the more technical fighter, and that absolutely is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but with a very large caveat here of, I think Pereira has the impetus to crowd Wonderboy, and when he does crowd him, like we've said, that's when it gets interesting to me, because we could see Wonderboy get taken down and Pereira just chucks in a takedown here and there, and Wonderboy's got to work himself back up, and here we are in this lactic acid build-up program. But if not, and Pereira's able to put hands on him, then it starts to get more and more sketchy if you're watching as a Wonderboy fan. Because if Wonderboy can't create the space with his excellent footwork, and he can't lull Pereira into time traps, where Pereira's overreaching or he's stepping into a place he doesn't want to, yeah, it's long. It's tough.
UFC have tried to put this together a couple of times and they've kept it together, Harry, as well. Is that kind of telling you a story that UFC are looking to try and get Michel Pereira the win here over Wonderboy and try to propel him up into the top 10 and maybe into the top 5 of the welterweight division?
I think for the UFC, they always have two game plans, right? I wonder, how many fights does Stephen Wonderboy Thompson have left? Is this one where the UFC are trying to put Stephen Wonderboy Thompson into a fight with another striker that he can go out on a high against? Is this Wonderboy saying, this is my last one and I want Pereira because it'll be fun and it'll be madness and it'll be whatever? I don't know. But there's also then the Michel Pereira who has the fun style and does whatever. But even if he gets the build and he gets the shine from Wonderboy, like, do we really see Michel Pereira climbing the rankings and doing interesting things in this division? I'm not sure I do.
No, I think he has a big task ahead of him. And I wouldn't put it beyond the realms the possibility of him going out and getting a win, but I think he's going to have to fight very well and a lot more, keep his hands a lot closer to his chest than we've seen in recent times. But look, that brings us on to the next fight. Another one that I'm really kind of struggling to get my head around as well, and Toney Ferguson and Bobby Green. Ferguson in the Nate Diaz fight didn't look in any great shapes, and he hasn't, Harry, been looking great in his last couple of fights. And that's kind of has me leaning a little bit towards Bobby Green, who has been looking better in fights, but, hasn't been really fighting the same level of competition really overall. But, I mean, two of these guys are at the latter stages of their career now at this stage, and it's hard to really comprehend what's going to happen.
This one makes me uncomfortable, to be honest. Toney Ferguson, 5 fights on the bounce. And like we say that Bobby Green hasn't been fighting the level of competition that Toney Ferguson has, and that's correct. But Toney Ferguson is a level of competition unto himself, and that's a vastly diminished level of competition to what he was. Sean will say he's the most overrated fighter in the UFC ever. But he's actually nodding. Fucking hell, I thought I was going to get it, but I didn't.
Is there any argument that he isn't the most overrated fighter in the history of the UFC?
I thought it was Magomed Ankalaev. No,
you're the only one who rates him. A lot of people rated Toney Ferguson, and
jeez,
but for me, Toney Ferguson, they're kind of Bobby Green and Toney Ferguson are essentially the same fighter. Super awkward style, don't know what they're going to do next, and I just think Bobby Green's got a better chin and hits harder than Toney Ferguson does, and Toney Ferguson is absolutely there to be hit now, and yeah, this one's going to be uncomfortable if we see Bobby Green finish Toney Ferguson. This one's
I've
going
been
to be
looking. I've been looking to try and figure a phrase to kind of describe how the two of these kind of compare, Seanie. And I think it is the game has been a little bit kinder to Bobby Green per se in terms of damage and the amount of battles that Toney Ferguson has been in since. And also a move down to lightweight here for Toney Ferguson as well is probably not the best move either for his chin in this fight with Bobby Green. You know, when Bobby Green gets into a good flow, he's a decent enough boxer. He sticks and moves well. He's in your face. And like Harry said, very, very awkward style, as is Toney Ferguson. But I don't think we can, whether we want to call him overrated, and I kind of agree with that as well. But whatever we called him in the past, what he is today is even lesser than that.
Oh yeah, he's completely shot today. Yeah, he's this is a fight if it happened 5-6 years ago, you know, there'd be no doubt about it, even though Toney Ferguson was, you know, over. And when do we say overrated now? He was overrated in terms of people thought he could beat Khabib Nurmagomedov. Like, no, like as laughable as when people said Ben Askren was the best welterweight in the world. It's just like, Ben Askren's a good fighter. Like, Ben Askren be a good top 30 UFC fighter. You know, Toney Ferguson was a good top 10 UFC fighter, but he wasn't the best lightweight in the world ever, or not within 2 or 3 fighters of it. Like, and that's why I say he was overrated. But anyway, Bobby Green was never a top 15 UFC lightweight. Maybe he was in it at one stage, but you know, a good fighter, a guy who improved at times, but still. Toney Ferguson showed up for 12 fights in a row and won every single one of them, despite all his shortcomings. Bobby Green was a guy who turned up and he'd win 2 in a row and lose 1 and then lose 2 and then lose 1 and maybe win 3 in a row and lose. Like, there's a big difference there in professionalism, in everything, in really everything. But now I think Bobby Green has, because he never put that win streak together and never fought the upper echelon apart from once or twice, whereas Toney Ferguson did it multiple times. He didn't have to put in the level of camps for 5-round fights. He didn't have to maybe take even the level of damage. Like, Toney Ferguson was taking damage in fights he was winning. Let's not forget that too. And as Ian, you very well put there, the game has maybe been kinder to Bobby Green in terms of the amount of damage he has taken. And he is a better fighter now. You know, the curve, he was just passed out at one stage, and I think Bobby Green will probably beat Toney Ferguson here and maybe knock him out. If he does knock him out, this will be Toney Ferguson's last UFC fight. I would think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree as well on that. It'd be interesting to see. First fight on the main card is a welterweight fight between Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland. Interesting stylistic matchup in terms of, we know what Michael Chiesa is going to do and want to do. Can Kevin Holland stop it? Fighting takedown artist has been Kevin Holland's kryptonite in past fights. He's had some success, I guess, against the likes of Shikari and stuff. And I think this is a case of a Chiesa who's coming off 2 defeats, who's working on the desk. Maybe a guy who was 1 foot out against a guy who's just who has 2 feet in the cage, but Kevin Holland's head isn't always in there as well, Harry. when you look at this fight, I mean, how do you break it down? How do you foresee it coming about?
So I've picked differently inside baseball to the guys so far that have given their picks in the SevereMMA picks chat. I actually just think this is quite a nice stars matchup for Michael Chiesa, in that Kevin Holland never takes any fight seriously, right? He'll talk a lot. He'll throw weird slaps. He's long. He's rangy. And I think that plays against him in this one. I think if we go and we look at the 2 losses, we have Vicente Luque. I mean, sure, look, our favorite fighter of all time. These things happen in MMA. And then Sean Brady, well, we only saw the ceiling of Sean Brady when he went and fought a guy that needs a title shot at some point, and that's Bilal Muhammad. And so there's no shame in losing to a Sean Brady, especially not the stylistic matchup of Sean Brady in comparison to Michael Chiesa. But I just think that Kevin Holland is a nice stars matchup. He's going to allow grappling exchanges, which is exactly where Chiesa wants to be. I think there will be scrambles. Holland from the bottom will do less work to get up and more work to land weird pot shots from different places and throw up stupid subs and talk to Chiesa and ask him to let him up rather than anything else. And so I think this is a nice stylistic matchup for Chiesa to come in and get a W on, a pay-per-view main card. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just can't see this being any other way than Chiesa just grapple fucking him, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it like that myself. I don't really have too much to add. I guess, I kind of said my piece, and I agree with what you said as well, Harry. Wondering what you're thinking about this matchup. Do you think Kevin Holland can pull it out of the bag? Do you think he can stop the takedown? And because I feel if this fight does play out on the feet, he has a big advantage over Chiesa, especially at this stage of his career.
I'm not sure, honestly. I think it's two massively flawed fighters fighting each other, I think. Chiesa's woeful on the feet for the most part, but very good on the ground when he gets you there. But he doesn't have the best takedowns in the world either. Like, look, even against Luga, he did take him down and he got darsed about 30 seconds later. So I think the same as the two of ye. I'd probably go with Chiesa, but I don't think he's a good enough fighter for me to say he's definitely going to win, against Kevin Holland, who, if he had his head in the cage, as you very well put there, Ian, that he usually doesn't, I think he absolutely has the ability to stop a couple of takedowns and finish him. Like, he's not going in there with Colby Covington or Bilal Muhammad, as someone mentioned a minute ago. He's gone in there with a limited enough wrestler who's just big and strong and is very good at finishing guys on the ground. He's a good wrestler when he gets to the ground. He's a good grappler on the floor. I'm kind of talking myself into a Kevin Holland pick here, but I don't know. Maybe I'll go with my old-fashioned draw pick here again, like I have a couple of times, and I might be right, but yeah, I don't know. Do you know what? I'm probably going to look at the betting prices here and let myself decide, because if Chiesa submission is a good enough price here, I'll probably go for that. I think it'll be a finish. I think someone will get the finish here. That's my pick, the fight to finish inside the distance.
There you go. And if the betting show and Sherdog has there been anything to go by, we have to be sticking by the word of Seanie bets going in to the opening fight on the main card. And as we move on to the prelims headliner, and that's a fight between Trevin Giles and Gabriel Bonfim, not his brother Ishmael, who lost 2 weeks ago. Gabriel,
what?
Yeah, much to Seanie Sheehan's surprise before we started recording here. But Gabriel Bonfim, is the better of the two Bonfim brothers here, Harry. We've talked about him time and time again. He's coming off a very good win over Mansour Lazzez in his last fight. Trevin Giles coming off a win over Preston Parsons. How do you see this fight going? I really, really fancy Gabriel Bonfim to get the win in this fight, to be honest.
I think this is fire versus ice, and this is the test. This is the test that the UFC are looking at, right? Trevin Giles is your bog standard up and down fighter. That's no disrespect whatsoever. He can do a bit of the everything, but he's not setting anything on fire, right? He does the striking well enough to get him through fights. He can grapple offensively. He can grapple defensively. Doesn't have massive power, but can crack a little bit. But anyone that's destined for the upper echelons of divisions, like Mike Morales, like Dricus du Plessis, they're going to beat him. And so I think this is the test to see whether is Bonfim too much of a wild man? Because if he is, Trevin Giles will stifle him and will push him up against the fence and will make this difficult. If Bonfim is the real deal, and what we saw against Mansour Lazzez, if that's going to be something that is more of a run-of-the-mill performance than maybe we expected it to be, then he's going to produce the same thing against Trevin Giles. And so I think this, as a stars matchup for Gabriel Bonfim, is absolutely excellent, because we're going to find out, yet again, we're asking the question, here's a veteran that knows who he is and knows what he's doing inside the UFC, is going to carry some strength down from his stint at 185. And here we are. What can you do, right? Is this mad bastardry that you throw around the cage? Is that just a bit more of a gimmick against a slight uptick in fighter? Or is this just who you are?
Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen from Mansour Lazzez, I would have more of a memory of what he's done in the octagon rather than Trevin Giles, to be honest. So I think, Trevin Giles went in there, got up the win against Preston Parsons. I think he's just going to be chewed up and eaten alive here by Bonfim. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to this fight, Sean, or you'd like to move on to the next one. Let's move on to the next one then. Let's talk about Derek Lewis versus Marcus Rogerio de Lima. And Harry's getting the wave on. Look at
these prelims are fucking terrible.
Like, I'm sitting here,
just as you're talking there, I'm like, I might actually not even watch these. Like, I might tune in for the Derek Lewis fight, but before that, like, what? This is terrible. Like, they're just not.
One thing I was going to say about this fight, lads, was at least it's not one of the. At least it's not one of a fight that was thrown in the middle of the main card here, just for fucking.
Sherman versus Jared Vanderaa, 16.
But Derek Lewis, the story of him, the last fight was he came in crazy shape and then absolutely folded in less than a couple of minutes against Sergey Spivak. He's coming in here relying on his power against Marcus Rogerio de Lima, who has yet to be dropped or hurt badly with a punch. That's one interesting stat that I've felt here. And I mean, I'm wondering, looking at this, thinking that this could be a chance to kind of progress a fresh new name into the higher level rankings in the heavyweight division with Marco Rogerio de Lima, probably taking out a Derek Lewis that's not really all in mixed martial arts anymore. Would that be fair assessment, lads?
They're both trash at this point.
Yeah. Anything else, Johnny?
I that makes sense, right? What you just said there. But it's Derek Lewis. So I'm like thinking the UFC are probably looking at this as a way to get Derek Lewis a win and get him back to headline in a card in Cincinnati, Ohio or something, That's what Derek Lewis's best value is for the UFC. So I understand what you said, but I'd say the UFC are probably hoping for the opposite. The UFC are probably hoping they get another couple of main events out of Derek Lewis. But look, Derek Lewis is always fun. I don't know if you agree. Myself and Graham Raw was saying on the podcast, but like when Derek Lewis tries to be a better fighter, he's worse. Like he needs to go in there and just be bad Derek Lewis and knock a fucker out,
Yeah, do you do like similar enough to Justin Gaethje at the best of times in the main event? We don't want him to. You kind of have to be half a mad bastard to go in there against Dustin Poirier. Same with Derek Lewis, but look, it's grim reading if you're looking back at Derek Lewis' record in recent times. He's only win in his last 5 fights is against Chris Daukaus, losses to Cyril Gane, Tai Tuivasa, Sergey Pavlich, Sergey Spivak. Look at all guys who are up there. Maybe you have a little bit of sense in thinking that, this is a drop down for Derek Lewis, but it's also a jump up for Marcus Rogerio de Lima. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the push up the division after this fight goes down. Jesus, if this one goes 3 rounds, it's going to be tough slogging. To go down through the rest of the card real quickly, Roman Kopylov takes on Claudio Ribeiro, 185 pounds. Jake Matthews goes up against Darius Flowers, who smells lovely, in the 170-pound division. CJ Vergara fought very well in his last fight. I'm looking forward to seeing him in the 125-pound division against Vinicius Salvador. Matthew Smelsberger goes in against Urias Medic. That should be a decent fight. And Miranda Maverick. I got Medic and Maverick mixed up there. Miranda Maverick goes in and takes on Priscilla Cachoeira at 125 to kick us off. Harry, I'm going to send it over to you. Of all the fights that I've named there, is there anything?
There is.
Sean laughs.
There is. I always still interested in a Miranda Maverick performance. I still think that she can be a player in this division. We just need to start working out some kinks and putting a run together. And Priscilla Cachoeira, similar sort of player. So I like that matchup. Semmelsberger versus Medic will be insane, I imagine. Semmelsberger has more power than he knows how to deal with, and ends up falling all over the place a lot of the time by just trying to kill someone. And so that'll be interesting. Urias Medic hits really hard too. Good body puncher. That's grand. And yeah, I echo your statement on CJ Vieira. Always interested in the CJ Vieira fight, specifically after his last performance. So yeah, I'm in there too.
That's it. We're not getting the jam-packed UFC 290 card. The prelims do let us down ever so slightly, but, you know, a couple of interesting bites on the prelims. The main card is what it's all about. It's what we focused our attention on. Any final thoughts, Harry or Sean, before we wrap it up?
There's a good Bellator card on this weekend. There are a few good fights. There's a good Cage Warriors card on as well. AJ McKee against Patricky Pitbull over in Bellator. Kyoji Haraguchi is fighting for the flyweight title.
The Gooch.
Very good fight. And Magomedov versus oh God, what's his name? It's just, I did a full preview on this half an hour ago. Danny Sabatello. That's a real fucking battle. And there's that's a great scrap. Some great fights there, but Lorenz Larkin against Andrei Koreshkov as well. A fucking great card there over in Bellator. But Cage Warriors as well, the flyweight title is on the line over there. There's a few Irish fighters as well on it. There's Leon Hill. Yeah, the guy who beat Adam Cullen last time out. And one of my top prospects in all of the UK and Ireland, James Power. Watch out for him on that Cage Warriors card. He is brilliant. So there you go.
Absolutely. The lads will be breaking down this card and all of those fights on the big podcast this Sunday. Me and Harry will be back to look at the UFC 291 card and break it down in detail on the Balance Breakdown this coming Tuesday. Check out Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell on Twitter, Instagram, at Sean Sheen Bah on Twitter, Instagram, at O'Neill MMA. And that is a wrap for this preview show. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night. Tune in and hear what the lads have to say after the fact. And we'll see you all next week.